It's Monday, and that so happens to be the day that I like to talk about monsters. Hello, and welcome to Monster Mondays. I'm Geoff Arbuckle, co-host of the podcast Film Seizure, that you can catch each Wednesday morning at filmseizure.com or at a number of podcast providers online. Oh boy, we're getting to the really good stuff in terms of classic Doctor Who stories. There are over 300 total stories across all the Doctor Who that has been televised in the last 62 years. This week, we're going to look at Inferno. Not only is the season finale of Jon Pertwee's first season as the Third Doctor often hailed as one of the better episodes by most fans, this is my favorite story of them all. When I first saw Inferno as a kid, it blew me away. I had gotten plenty used to Jon Pertwee as the Doctor by this point. I knew him from the Five Doctors during the Fifth Doctor's era. And when we finally got the opportunity to see him here in central Indiana on our local PBS station, I got totally engrossed in the three previous serials that I saw him in: Spearhead from Space, The Silurians, which we talked about last week, and The Ambassadors of Death. I was really into this Doctor's whole thing. But then came Inferno. Like with some of the themes of The Silurians, where two there's two races of beings were xenophobic enough to each other to be more than happy to commit genocide and take over the earth, I was not unaware of the concept of alternate realities. I knew the Star Trek episode Mirror, Mirror, and I was a reader of comic books. So if you read superhero comics, then you better believe you know a thing or two about alternate realities. It's an age-old subject in comic books, and it's a topic that is used quite a bit throughout pretty much all types of science fiction. But the concept was absolutely new to Doctor Who. In fact, Inferno is the first time Doctor Who ever played with alternate realities. While it's absolutely a concept that science fiction, like I said, loves to play with, Doctor Who was about time travel and originally intended to mostly be an educational program. Take the Doctor, Susan, Ian, and Barbara, as we saw in the very first season of Doctor Who, to basically visit the Aztecs or the Reign of Terror or other historical events, and you are doing a fictionalized historical lesson. In fact, there used to be an audio series here in the United States called You Were There that would give more or less a historical lesson through a story concept, as if you were actually there witnessing those historical events. Same kind of concept with Doctor Who, but as the show became more and more popular and people responded to the adventure in the science fiction stories, the historical concept was almost entirely dropped altogether. Sometimes a story like the Celestial Toy Maker or the Mind Robber, where our characters are transported to someplace just outside of reality or in a pocket realm of some sort that belonged to the villain solely or whatever. That could happen, but Doctor Who was not interested in presenting the world in an alternate way. Well, beyond the concept of invading aliens or time-traveling, alien. Oh, and don't forget E-Space, but I digress. While Inferno has always been very well received, the alternate reality concept would not be revisited until May 2006, when the 10th Doctor and Rose shifted into a different reality where they witnessed the rise of an alternate version of the Cybermen. It's almost like writers and producers just thought, Inferno nailed it. We maybe better not ever try to do it again, and they just didn't do it anymore, at least not in the classic era. So with no further ado, this is yet another 7-part story. Also, the last time Doctor Who would ever do that in the classic era, to have a 7-part story. So we better get right into it, shall we? Now, at Project Inferno, run by Sir Keith Gold, there is an issue with one of the pipes that requires maintenance to take a look at it. Now, maybe what you don't want to see is a bunch of green goop oozing out of a pipe at a highly scientific deep earth drill complex calling itself Project Inferno, but Anyway, Sir Keith is the executive director of the project. Now, the guy who runs the drilling and is the scientist that put this all together is Professor Stallman, who is a real hard ass. He did not want the drill to be slowed while the leak is repaired. Sir Keith has gone kind of behind Stallman's back and requested the assistance of Greg Sutton, who is an expert in drilling on oil rigs, to be on site to basically help with various incidents or alternative concepts if the need arises. Now, the drill at Project Inferno is already 20 miles deep and is about to penetrate the Earth's crust. After doing so, they will tap the pockets of something that Stallman has called Stallman's gas, which can be used then as an energy source. So again, it's kind of like last week's The Silurians, this idea of trying to find a cheap alternative energy source that would allow for these kind of crazy scientific concepts and plants and experiments to take place. But elsewhere, when the maintenance man, Harry Slocum, touches the oozing green goop, it is extremely hot to the touch and stains the hand of the maintenance man. And he seems to go a little out of his mind almost right away as he starts to act something more animalistic as he goes outside and attacks another worker with a wrench. The next day, the doctor and Unit arrive at Project Inferno, so that Unit can basically be there just to make sure there's no sabotage and that there's no major concern there. But the doctor wants to observe the action there, and he's told of the murder that Slocum committed the day before. And when he examines the wrench, he notices that the wrench, even 24 hours later, is extremely hot to the touch. Elsewhere on Project Inferno's site, the doctor has a garage that uses some of the power from the nuclear reactor to run what's inside that garage, the TARDIS console, which is part of an experiment to try to get it to travel despite his exile by the Time Lords. As the Doctor and Liz experiment with the TARDIS using nuclear power from the plant's reactor, Slocum sneaks in and attacks the technician and messes with the reactor itself. This sends the Doctor into a strange void with the TARDIS console before being brought back after Liz is able to cut the power. Now, back at Project Inferno, the nuclear reactor is having a power surge, sending the entire complex into high alert. Slocum, devolving into a primitive being known as a Primord, jumps out to attack Sergeant Benton, the Brigadier, and the Doctor in the reactor control room. But they eventually subdue Slocum, and they turn the power down, which causes the crazed man to pass out, and the Doctor recognizes the scorch marks on the wall that Slocum was leaning against before passing out. He also recognizes that a unit soldier shot Slocum twice through the heart, but Slocum didn't die. He's also extremely hot to the touch still. And Slocum also seems to be going through a metamorphosis, and it has yet to complete. What the Doctor will find out later, because they never really go back to his pondering of why it didn't complete the metamorphosis. It all has to do with heat. The hotter it gets, the more the people that are infected to become Primords complete their metamorphosis into that Primord creature, which is more or less just people that kind of look like green werewolves of a sort, I guess. But the unit soldier and the technician from the reactor are also now acting strange after being attacked and touched by Slocum. They too are starting to metamorphose. And the sounds these Primords make is something the Doctor says he has heard before. He says it sounds like something he heard in the 19th century at the explosion of Krakatoa. After Stallman, who is not at all a fan of the Doctor coming around and making himself seem smarter and better than Stallman, shuts off the power to the Doctor's garage, it's revealed that Stallman is also infected by the green goop. Now, the Doctor eventually turns his power back on to run another experiment with the TARDIS console, but not before finding Stallman attempting to sabotage the project's computer that might just prove that his calculations are incorrect and might even actually prove that this whole thing at Project Inferno is dangerous. But he does end up breaking out some Venusian karate to stop Stallman. But unable to prove to the Brigadier that Stallman was trying to sabotage the computer, he returns to the console and starts another experiment that ends with a freak accident, causing the Doctor, the console, and Bessie to dematerialize completely. Now, when the Doctor rematerializes, it looks like Earth, but something seems off about it. The first sign that something is off is a poster in the Doctor's garage that shows a picture of what I assume is the Prime Minister, and it reads, "Unity is strength," which is a bit more fascistic than he's used to around these parts, even for being constantly around UNIT, a military organization. But second, the garage door was operated by the Doctor's sonic screwdriver, but not anymore. He's also surprised to see a sign that reads technical storage on his door with a very different logo also. Now, he's then shot at by what seems to be a UNIT soldier who tells Sergeant Benton that he saw a saboteur. The Doctor is then chased by the soldiers, but believes he sees a friendly face, that of Liz Shaw. Except she goes by the name Elizabeth, and she's dressed in military garb and has dark hair as opposed to her usual red. She then arrests the Doctor, and he's brought to Brigade Leader Lethbridge Stewart. Now, the brigade leader is sans mustache and has added an eye patch, as opposed to the regular brigadier's mustachioed face and no eye patch or scars. And it's clear that the Doctor is not on the Earth he's familiar with. But a few things are the same on both. Both have a version of Project Inferno. Both have a Lethbridge Stewart, Benton, and Liz. Both have a problem with primords. The primary difference at Project Inferno on this Earth is Sir Keith was seemingly killed the day before while on his way to the Ministry to file a complaint, and the drilling is also farther along than on the Prime Earth. Now, Stallman is still a dick and is still slowly turning into a primord. His assistant Petra is a little harder on this world. She's also a full doctor. And also we have Greg Sutton, who is a little bit less misogynistic, I guess is the best word to put it. And man, he mostly directed a lot of that misogyny toward the pretty Petra, but he's not as much here. He's part of this Project Inferno employee group, and this is a government facility here, and is staffed by basically what's, for a lack of a better term, scientific-minded crew of indentured servants. The importance of why Stallman does not want the project's computer to be operating properly in either reality is better explained here. If the computer is working properly, it will warn everyone that the further the drill goes, the higher the likelihood of a catastrophic accident that will basically befall not just the project, but the entire planet. And as he attempts to repair the computer by replacing a missing microcircuit, the Doctor is found by Benton, who threatens to shoot him on the spot if he does not come with him. Now, thankfully, Section Leader Elizabeth Shaw stops Benton so that she can follow the proper bureaucratic procedure for the Doctor's execution. It's pretty spot on here that that this fascistic version of who would have been UNIT but is part of the government military, they talk a big game, but they also have to follow these incredibly rigid procedures to actually get anything done. They constantly want to threaten the Doctor with execution, but in order to do so, they have to run it up the chain of command and get all the forms and everything filled out so that they are basically keeping records of everything. It's kind of a funny little joke here that's kind of woven into the early part of the serial. But this gives the Doctor time to basically find the circuit to repair the computer, which does reveal the truth about the danger of the whole project. And there is both a heat issue with the drill bit and a pressure issue with the shaft and what they are drilling into. Both the heat and the pressure need to be dispersed, or it's a big time problem. Now, the doctor is able to convince Liz to basically sort of trust him by finding out that she did indeed, at one point in time when she was younger, wanted to become a scientist, but instead she went into the military. The doctor fixing the computer and explaining what the danger was with the drilling earns him a little bit of a stay of execution by proving that he is not there to destroy the place as a saboteur, but it doesn't save him from long, aggressive interrogations by Liz and Lethbridge Stewart. The doctor attempts to convince the brigade leader and Stallman that Stallman himself is infected by the green goop and is turning him into a primord, but Stallman has dressed the burn in a bandage under his glove, and the brigade leader has no interest in believing what he thinks is an enemy spy. Now, the doctor is put into a cell next to another that has a primord tranquilized in the bed under the covers. Now, back in the Prime universe, Liz and the Brigadier are concerned about the whereabouts of the doctor, and it seems as though the Prime Earth is about 24 hours earlier than the alternate Earth. Sir Keith is planning to go to the Ministry of Science to make his concerns known that accelerated drilling will be disastrous, but Stallman refuses to slow down and believes Sir Keith is trying to stand in his way. In the alternate reality, the Primord awakens and attacks the guard and tries to attack the doctor by bending the bars and coming over into his cell. But the doctor is able to fight him off and escape, and manages to sneak back into the project's compound using a hazmat suit. The doctor attempts to stop the drilling before it breaks through the crust, creating a catastrophe, but is held at gunpoint by Stallman, and the drill completes its penetration of the crust. Now, the Doctor and Greg attempt to stop the flood of heat and radiation from the Earth's core. Greg is knocked out by Stallman, who attempts to infect him with the green goop, but the Doctor ends up stopping Stallman. Greg seemingly knocks out Stallman, only to discover that Stallman has closed the door to the room with all the pipes where all of this heat is coming up, and begins to infect the other technicians who were injured in that room. And the Brigadier explains to the brigade leader, Liz, Greg, and Petra, that with the heat and gases that Project Inferno has unleashed, the pressure will continue to build and build and build until basically the Earth will be reverted to its primordial lava-covered surface from the very early days of the planet's existence. The brigade leader and the soldiers are duty-bound to remain on site. Now, Petra hopes to find a way to rewire the computer to get a solution to the catastrophe, but Greg wants to escape and get as far away from this whole thing to live his last few days in the best ways possible, basically. The doctor begs the brigadier, or the brigade leader in this case, and Liz to help him get power to the TARDIS console to help him return to his reality to save the other versions of them. But they aren't so much wanting to help him save their other selves, but to actually save themselves, something the Doctor refuses to do. He says that basically taking them to the Prime reality will basically create a chain reaction that will basically destroy every universe, due to the, basically it would be something that the universe on a cosmic level couldn't really handle with the two versions of the same people existing in the same place. But eventually the facility is crawling with Primords, while in the Prime timeline, Sir Keith seemingly dies in a car accident while on the way back to the facility to shut down Project Inferno until further investigation by the Ministry, assuring the Prime timeline is headed for basically the exact same catastrophe. Now, the crew in the alternate facility, in the alternate worlds facility, fight off the Primords while the Doctor fixes the power supply to give the TARDIS console enough power to jump back over to the Prime timeline. Now, speaking of the Prime timeline, with Sir Keith nowhere to be found, the Brigadier demands Stallman stop drilling. And that only goes so far. Stallman is pretty much a dick. He refuses to basically listen to any reason. The Doctor does manage to fix the power supply and returns to his garage to return to the Prime timeline. The brigade leader then tries to force the Doctor to take them with him back to the Prime timeline. But if the Doctor still disagrees and leaves them to die, the brigade leader says he will make sure the Doctor dies too. And as the Doctor prepares to hit the switch to leave, the brigade leader attempts to shoot the Doctor, but Liz shoots him, allowing the Doctor to leave just in time before the whole world is engulfed in lava and explosions. Now, as the Doctor recovers from a coma, he talks in his sleep about output pipe number 2 being faulty, which Liz and the Brigadier hear and understand that that's what is leading to the coming catastrophe. Liz goes to the control room and convinces Greg and Petra to completely reverse the power to flush the shaft with coolant. That diverts the catastrophe that the other world experience. Turns out the Sir Keith returns with news that he plans to shut down the project. The Doctor realizes that the pattern can be changed, and that if there are basically based on free will, which creates these alternate timelines, they basically can, ultimately save this version of Earth by changing the series of events that took place that led to the other Earth's explosion and destruction. Now, the Doctor starts to smash the controls in the project's control room and tells Liz that the computer is missing a circuit to warn them of the danger. And with the delay in all of this that was caused by Sir Keith not being dead and the Doctor making as much trouble for them as possible, Stallman actually is able to turn into a Primord fully, which gives Petra the authority and the ability to shut everything down, while the Doctor and Greg shut down the drill to give the order basically to have the drill shaft filled in as well. And Project Inferno is completely and totally shut down. The Doctor once again attempts to use the console to leave, and appears this time he is successful, until he returns to the garage asking for the Brigadier's help to get the console out of the dump that it rematerialized in a couple of 100 yards away. Now let's talk about 3 things that I like about Inferno. First, and yes, this seems like such a small thing, but it's something that is rarely seen in Doctor Who. In fact, it almost sets the stage that everyone knew they made a banger of a serial and wanted to make sure to treat it special. I love how every episode within the serial opens with footage of an exploding volcano spewing hot lava and utterly destroying everything in its path. And what's more, the title Inferno appears in larger than usual lettering and fades in and fades out over the lava. The same for writer Don Houghton, who wrote this and the following seasons, The Mind of Evil. Houghton later wrote the Dracula films, Dracula AD 1972, The Satanic Rites of Dracula, and The Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires for Hammer. Now, for my all-time favorite Doctor Who serial, this seems like such a small thing to highlight and one of my 3 likes about it, but what can I say? The way the volcanic explosions happen at the end of the opening titles is just eye-catching in that bright color, and kind of ominously shows the name of the serial in big letters. That's just fantastic and really lets you know that this is something different for Doctor Who. This is a wholly different take on how the Doctor interacts with people that you are so used to being his friends and his compadres. It's just really neat, and I always remember thinking, wow, it's like that's really cool that they do that for each of these episodes in the serial. They very rarely do stuff like that in other serials like that, where they had some other thing than just the normal title card with the normal font, the normal lead into each episode, and so forth. So it was kind of a neat thing to do, and it is definitely something that does make you think that this is something special. It is a quite different Doctor Who tale that you're about to watch. Second, I very much like how everything in the alternate reality just feels different. it's seemingly, and maybe this is a trick of the mind because you know that he's in a different reality, but it's almost like it's shot harshly. It's a little bit of a lighting adjustment to almost make it seem visibly, at least, a little darker. And we'll talk a little bit more about a couple of performances in this episode coming up here in just a few moments. But early on in this episode, as the Doctor was arriving to the Project Inferno, it seemed like it was a spring day. We see a sunny morning around the Project Inferno campus. However, when the Doctor comes over to the alternate reality, it constantly looks gloomy, like it's a fall day. It's enough to make it already a little bit off the moment the Doctor leaves his garage. Angles are also used to shoot characters who are often seen softer and friendlier, but here the angle at which characters are shot comes off as sinister. Close-ups are almost jarring and unsettling how they're used. It's not like Doctor Who never used close-ups, he constantly did. And even in the prime timeline of this, there are a lot of close-ups. There's just something different about the close-ups here. They do come off as unsettling. It feels oppressive as opposed to friendly and full of camaraderie. There is a change in wardrobe too, which comes off as fascistic. Even the scientist outfits have a more militarized slant to them. It's a great study in how this serial changes heavily in between just 2 different episodes and changes the entire feel and atmosphere of the entire story around it. It's amazing how much they do with the limited settings of the control room, the brigadier/brigade leader's office, the Doctor's garage, and some of the area around the campus of the project by changing the entire feel of the episode's plot. It just changes. It just makes everything feel different depending on which universe you're in. And third, I really want to give some praise to Caroline John as Liz and Nicholas Courtney as the Brigadier in this serial. Both have to portray wildly different versions of their characters here. Pretty much no other guest star is acting that much different in the alternate timeline than the prime timeline. But it's fun to see Courtney play the Brigadier as a completely inapproachable, unsettling, and unreasonable military brute, instead of the unwavering and completely capable and friendly brawn to match Pertwee's wit. But for Caroline John in particular, this would be her final serial as the Third Doctor's companion. She would be replaced at the start of season 8 by Katie Manning's Jo Grant. We'll talk a little bit more about that next week, but it's kind of wild to think that her final serial with Pertwee is mostly adversarial. More than half the serial is in the alternate timeline. So she's hard, unfriendly, and she really shines in this story. Liz was hardly the Shrieking Violet most of the Doctor's lady companions were throughout the years prior to her joining the show. She was actually an adult. Caroline John was 30 when she appeared in Doctor Who. And, you know, so she doesn't come off as a teenager or young adult who seemed to be relatable to the younger audiences. She was a scientist, and in this serial even reminds the Brigadier that she is a doctor herself. She's smart and capable. She's not someone who would just pass the Doctor test tubes and tell him how brilliant he is. So it's neat to see her in a twisted version that makes her every bit the member of UNIT that the military people are, instead of the softer, more open-minded scientists working alongside UNIT. Now, at least her final serial ends with a shot centered on her laughing over the Doctor needing to make up for calling the Brigadier names out of anger when he tried to get away with the console. That laugh and smile is also nice considering how long we were left with her harsher alternate version. John would later appear in The Five Doctors as in just a single scene as a trick to try to lure the Doctor to danger. She later appeared in the Children in Need charity special Dimensions in Time in 1993. But she would once again play Liz Shaw in the short serial Probe, in which she investigated murders. That series was written by Mark Gatiss, who would later write for the Doctor Who revival in the 21st century. Probe also featured many returning Doctor Who actors, including Jon Pertwee. In 2012, Caroline John passed away at the age of 71 from cancer. But I would have liked to have seen more Liz Shaw. I think she is such an interesting character because she was headier, she was smarter, she was a little bit older than the typical companions that you would have seen from the Doctor. And that's something that is unique throughout the remainder of the classic series. It really isn't until the 10th Doctor gets Donna Noble that you have another more mature character like that traveling with the Doctor. But that wraps up this week's Monster Mondays. You can catch new episodes of Monster Mondays each Monday afternoon at filmseizure.com. Don't forget to follow Film Seizure at Facebook, Threads, Instagram, and Blue Sky. You can also subscribe to Film Seizure to get both the Film Seizure podcast and Monster Mondays at your favorite podcast providers. We also upload the episodes to YouTube. And you can also check out my website, bmovieenema.com, to read new reviews every Friday morning. Next time, we slide a little further down Pertwee's timeline as the Doctor when we say goodbye to the companion best linked to his run and meet a bunch of environmentalists in the Green Death. And until next week, stay spooky.